Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 1st, 2008 meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have roll call, please?
Council members Draymond.
Here.
Quintero. Here. Weaver. Yusefian.
Here.
Mayor Najarian.
Here. Mr. Draymond, will you please lead us in the flag salute?
I will. Would you all please rise? Will you please place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for the invocation.
And our guest clergy this evening is the Reverend David Palmer from the First United Methodist Church of Glendale.
Knowing that recently our community, faith community, has lost a great leader, Father Mark Joffman, who was a chaplain at Glendale Memorial Hospital, we as a community realized that sometimes life is unpredictable. And I thought I would share these words from Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways, lean on Him, and He will direct your paths. So, Lord, as we come to you tonight, we recognize that indeed you are a part of the details. And even though life is turmoil sometimes and we don't have control over everything, we know that we can trust in you, for all things are in your hands. Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Kasakian,
Yes, right.
may we have your report?
The agenda for the April 1st, 2008 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, March 27, 2008 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Before we move on to presentations and appointments, as the Reverend Palmer mentioned, we did lose a member of our community, tragically, and I would like to adjourn tonight's meeting in memory of Reverend Mark Joffman, who passed away March 21st. Reverend Joffman, 51, was found by a hiker at Griffith Park, and the cause of death has not yet been determined. Joffman was a longtime pastor at the Ecumenical Catholic Community of St. Paul and St. Andrew in South Glendale and chaplain at the Glendale Memorial Hospital. He was a former president of the Glendale Religious Leaders Association. As chaplain at Glendale Memorial Hospital, Joffman provided counseling for grief, drug and alcohol addiction, and oversaw the hospital's annual grant donations to local nonprofit organizations. He also served as the hospital's director of mission integration. And he overcame a bout of cancer 5 years ago. Memorial services were held last weekend. He will undoubtedly be greatly missed by our entire community. And I would ask my colleagues that we all adjourn the meeting in his memory at the end of tonight's session. Mr. Kasaki.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I just want to add to that Father Mark Joffman, I knew him through my activities as clerk, through my duties in this position, and it was actually his idea to initiate this sharing of the duties of the invocation between myself and the Glendale Religious Leaders Association. You'd be hard-pressed to find an individual in this community who is more committed to the betterment of his neighborhoods and the souls and salvation of the souls of his parishioners and other individuals. Just an all-around kind person, a wonderful person who will be sorely missed by the community.
Item 3, please.
3 is presentation and appointments. F3 is agenda preview for the meetings of April 8, 2008.
Mr. McFall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of council. Next week on April 8th, we'll be having a redevelopment agency meeting where the city attorney will be presenting a report on the revocation of the parking exception that had been previously approved on February 13th for property located at 240 North Brand, which is the proposed Glendale Career College site. There will be a joint meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Housing Authority, where the Director of Community Development and Housing will be presenting the proposed annual action plan for the Community Development Block Grant Program, the Emergency Shelter Grant, and Home Investment Partnership Programs for fiscal year 2008-2009. On the City Council, the first item of significance will be the reorganization of the City Council, that being the selection of a new mayor. And then there will be one item under action items, which is the resolution of appropriation for the purchase of Rockhaven. That will be all for next week.
Thank you. And,
Yes, anytime.
okay, speaking of Rockhaven, what do you have for us, Mr. McCall?
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Mayor and members of council, as I'm going back and restarting the slideshow over. As council is, of course, aware, there has been a recent acquisition of the city by of Rockhaven by the city. The site formerly known as the Rockhaven Sanitarium, and this last week, staff was requested to do an assessment, an initial assessment and inventory of the site, and we thought that it might be of interest to show a few of the images of the site, and without providing by any means a full historical background, which is extensive, and there's others who have a far greater knowledge of that than myself. But only by way of introduction. It was established in 1923 by a registered nurse, Agnes N. Richards, who is quite a character in the Montrose time, and there was a early promotional piece that she was involved with, and actually was printed in the paper up there, where she discussed why she found and selected this particular site, which she found a refuge for the convalescent of the sick, for those weary of mind, where the air was clear and pure, and where the sun shined warm, high enough to be above the fogs of the lowland. And Montrose offered the perfect location for this. So these are some of the photos of Rockhaven. Rockhaven, first is a series of the buildings. Rockhaven is a series of buildings, ultimately 15 buildings. They are constructed of both lath and plaster and of frame buildings, the older ones being frame buildings. Part of what we were doing up there, the city was doing, was assessing the structural integrity of the buildings, which, as you can imagine, there's extensive electrical and plumbing repairs, but actually found the buildings themselves to be relatively sound. These buildings all have names. 8 of the buildings were actually used as living residences. The other buildings were different types of support structures. The interiors are, in some cases, in some of the rooms, very complete, as was left by the residents when it was actually closed for operation last year. There are many rooms that are individual rooms where just 1 or 2 people stayed in. Then there are other rooms that were more of a ward type of setting with a number of bunks to them. There's various different fees and charges that were provided. It was opened for 6 patients initially in 1923. It had a maximum attendance of 100 people, but in the 80s and 90s, 65 people were the average number of residents. This is the commercial kitchen with the dining hall, and this is a basement area that as you can see, it's a lot of where a lot of individuals' artifacts ended up being stored after they were deceased. The grounds are landscaped quite heavily. Native oaks are probably the predominant plant. At one time it was quite a garden, and a lot of plants still are surviving well. Outdoor seating areas, they tried to make it as residence-like as possible. There is a lot of very comforting, sunny amenities. In fact, the colors of the buildings reflect that. Some early artwork, concrete troweled to look like stone. It is a particular art form that is resident in one particular area of the garden, all actually in very good condition. Maintenance needs, leaves and branches like that, of course, around them. And the property has a number of statues on it that in various states of repair, but a number of statues throughout the site, again, and intended all to create a comfortable garden-like setting for the residents who live there. This bear is found to be eerie by some as they see that. There was a landscape inventory that was done in 2003 on the trees because of the significance of some of the trees. These are shots of some of the wrought iron work, custom wrought iron work that was done on the site. A lot of very interesting amenities and details to the property. This is the wrought iron work, and actually some of the earlier photos were some of the detail. There is a row of rose bushes that were planted in memory of individuals who had been deceased on the site. And we found up there simply a large number of photos from times past from the individuals. There's lots of next steps. This is just an initial preview of the site and some of the preliminary findings and observations, and going through it and looking at what are some of the immediate issues, security being right at the top of the list of how to ensure the site remains secure. There has been a caretaker on site. The current caretaker and his wife have actually been there for 25 years. Already is uncovering some very interesting stories, such as some of these artifacts are actually reflecting of a individual lived there named Marion Rose, had quite an interesting background. This is her jewelry box and other artifacts. And that was it. This is just some initial pictures of the site.
Thank you. And of course, give us updates as things progress. Not on our agenda, also, is a particular item. I'm not sure if any of you were aware of the incident and the events that occurred last night. It was all over the 11 o'clock news. I have asked Assistant Chief Ron DePompa from the Glendale Police Department to come forward and give us as much information as he feels he can release regarding the incident. It's still under investigation, but I do think many residents happen to come across the crime scene, and we're all wondering what exactly you can tell us about the events last night.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. As you are aware, we did have an encounter last night with a very violent armed suspect, and it ultimately resulted in an officer-involved shooting where two of our officers were injured, and the suspect was actually pronounced dead at the scene at the conclusion of the event. And I'm sure some of you have had opportunity to hear some of the facts, but what we'd like to do is give you a little insight into that incident, what happened and why, and let you know a little bit about what we're doing in response now in terms of ensuring that our community stays safe, and that we take the proper measures to curb any consequential activity that might result from this. The individual we encountered last night was a individual by the name of Daniel Gonzalez. He's 28 years old, a resident of L.A., and recently paroled from state prison. My understanding is he had been out for about 2 weeks, and on current active parole for second-degree murder. So we are dealing with an individual that had a long criminal history here. During the course of the investigation today, we have learned that he actually had committed a gang-related murder about 2 hours prior to our contacting him last night, and that this murder actually occurred in an adjoining jurisdiction in LAPD Northeast Division's area. And so evidently he was taking some kind of refuge in our city at the time that the officers contacted him. It resulted not from a call for service, but from our special enforcement detail that works a very proactive assignment to go out and contact people and put most of their effort in terms of gang enforcement. And what happened is one of our officers saw Mr. Gonzalez walking on the street on Colorado Boulevard in the area of Adams, and attempted to make a contact with him. He appeared to be dressed in gang attire, sported numerous tattoos, and he recognized some as being prison and gang related. So the officer thought it was prudent to stop and talk to this individual. As soon as he did, the suspect immediately drew a .45 automatic handgun from his waistband and began firing at the officer. And ultimately, during the attempt to take this individual into custody, it resulted in a foot pursuit, and a multiple officer-involved shooting over a course of about 2 city blocks. And during that time, one of our officers was shot. Actually, the bullet struck him square in the chest, and thank God he was wearing a bulletproof vest that stopped the round, although it basically incapacitated him at the time. But nonetheless, he is fine, and the bulletproof vest did its job and certainly saved his life. A second officer was arriving at the scene, ultimately had the windows of his vehicle shot out by the suspect who was trying to escape, and he also was hit. We're not sure whether he was hit in the hand by flying glass or particles from the bullet penetrating the glass. But nonetheless, had a very, very violent suspect, heavily armed with additional magazines, and over the course of about two blocks, numerous shots were fired. Fortunately, no innocent bystanders were injured, and ultimately the officers were able to return fire and stop the suspect. So that is essentially what happened, and since that time the criminal investigation has been ongoing, and we have learned about this murder that occurred a couple hours prior in LAPD Northeast Division. And so we've been working closely with them, and they've actually now confirmed that the bullet cases from the suspect's gun at our scene last night in Glendale have been matched to the casings found at the murder in L.A. a few hours before. So we're quite confident that the suspect was one and the same. Unfortunately, an incident like this tends to evoke public fear, and what we want to do is certainly reiterate to all of you folks and our community as well that Glendale remains one of the safest cities, large cities in the entire country, and that nonetheless we're in close proximity to the large metropolitan area, and our urban environment is changing here. So the opportunity for violent offenders to drift into our area is a real and continuing probability, and it's something that we're acutely aware of and taking whatever steps we can to ensure that we keep Glendale the safe place that it is. So some of the immediate activities we're taking, just so you're aware, we are putting more officers on the street over the next few days, and they'll be riding double in our patrol cars, which is not typical for us. And additionally, we're going to be putting out an increased force in plainclothes vehicles that work specifically gangs and special enforcement. So we're hoping that we'll maintain a very assertive, proactive force over the next few days. So if there's any potential repercussions from this incident, that we'll be able to hopefully prevent it, if not be on top of it right away. But long term, and this is what I really want to share with you folks and the community at large is to let you know that the thing that Glendale isn't the safest large city in the country just by accident, and it comes at a very calculated approach, and probably the most significant part of that is just the quality of people that we employ and that make up the Glendale Police Department. I've been on that department 31 years, and it never ceases to amaze me the level of courage and dedication by the men and women of the Glendale Police Department, both sworn and non-sworn. They simply are the best, and they do a great job. And it was certainly illustrated last night when we had officers repeatedly setting aside their own personal safety and running into the face of fire. And they do it because it's their duty and they do it to safeguard our community. And it's pretty significant, and there were some tremendous acts of courage and valor out there last night that will be certainly illustrating to you folks in greater detail later on. And the second thing is, aside from having such good folks, is that we just want to reaffirm to you as our policymakers that our mission here is to be proactive crime fighters. We don't want to be a reactive force. And to that end, our officers will not just drive by or look the other way. Our officers are assertive out there. We're not going to wait for the criminal to bring the fight to us. We're going to bring the fight to the criminal element, and it simply will not be any other way. And based on that assertive stance, I think we send a clear message to the rest of the region that you don't come to Glendale to conduct your crime. You don't come to Glendale to find victims. We simply will not stand for that. But we cannot do that without your continued support, and we appreciate that. This council has always been staunch supporters of the police department, and in essence enabled us to take that kind of approach in the community. And we truly think that that's what makes Glendale the special place that it is in terms of public safety and low crime rate. So we're going to be continuing on that effort, and we look at this as one isolated incident, but we really see it as a sign of the times, and things and issues that we're going to have to continue to address as we move forward into the future to maintain our safety ranking. But nonetheless, we're very thankful that our officers are safe, that no community members were injured. It's but for the hand of God, we'd be looking at perhaps funeral arrangements for one of our officers out there last night. So it was truly a blessing that everybody came out safe, and that's the most important thing. So we wanted to share that with you and just give you an overview. We know you've been in meetings all day and probably not had an opportunity to hear all that was going on, and we'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Chief, please extend the council's and the entire city's sincere gratitude to all the members of the police force, especially those that were involved in this, in the apprehension of this crazed, I think we can call him now a crazed murderer, who wasn't going to stop and who was going to take as many people down with him as he could, and extend our best wishes for a speedy recovery to the two officers that were injured, and please be safe out there.
We will do so. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item, please.
And for City Council and staff comments.
Comments? Mr. Yusefian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two comments. One, it's almost it is April, and in June we will be voting on a budget. And so I would like to know, Mr. Bear, from the city manager, at one point do we start our, I know we all dread it, but our study sessions for our budget, considering this year it's going to be very, very tough. I don't want to wait too long because this is going to be very difficult, and I don't want to be forced in voting for a budget that we didn't have enough time to discuss the issue. So that's one item.
Mr. Starbird, do you want to respond to that? We'll pick up with Mr. Yusefian.
Well, very quickly, we'll be to you before the end of April with the first study session, and then to line out a calendar of study sessions to take you through the general fund budget. It isn't going to be a particularly easy year, and I suspect in the midst of that we're going to have a desire to talk about things like safety in the community. So we'll be, in fact, we picked a date, I forget now what it is, the 15th, April 15th, to have our first kickoff study session, where we're going to give you an overview of the budget this year, projection for next year, then talk about what kind of general goals and directions you want to give us as we begin to prepare a plan for you to review.
Okay. The second item is, since I thought that our budget issues weren't enough. So I decided I'm not going to run for city council. Instead, I'm going to run for the state senate to replace Jack Scott. So
I think the filing period ended, but you could always be a write-in candidate.
I think this is April.
well, that's, you guessed it.
Couldn't you wait for that announcement till tomorrow?
Anything else?
Oh, it's on April 1st. I figured I start with a little fun thing there.
I get it.
You don't get it very often. That's it.
Got a couple of
One other thing, Mr. Mayor. I would like to ask for extension for the two appointments that I have not been able to do. One is for the historic preservation, and the other one is for the arts and culture. On the issue of arts and culture, I would like this council to agendize that whole issue. That's part of the reason I have not reappointed someone to that commission. I understand that the staff person I read in the paper that is no longer with us, that has left. Also, there has been a lot of issues that was brought up by many commissioners about possibly changing the location of arts and culture to a different department, maybe in libraries or something like that, and a little bit more clarification as if what is it that we want them to do. So I think maybe we can agendize that item to discuss that, and then maybe I can go out there and recruit someone for that. But on historic preservation, actually, it's been my fault. I have been very busy, and I haven't had an opportunity to talk to some of the applicants. And I know one person who's applied for DRB would like to also apply for historic preservation. Gives them an opportunity to also do that, too.
Okay, so we'll extend a 30-day additional period for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And the agendizing of the,
Historic.
should we call it future of the arts and
Arts and culture,
or modifications to arts and culture?
What is it what we want to do with them?
Mr. Mayor, we're already working on a report to you evaluating that issue, so it'll probably be coming back to you in the April-May timeframe in conjunction with your budget. That'll look at those kinds of options about where is the best home and what is your vision for your arts and culture program.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Quintero.
So I wanted to talk about a couple of events I attended. The Armenian Relief Center did their usual wonderful job of showcasing some of the people they work with drug and alcohol problems. It was a great event, well attended, and every time I go there I kind of feel inspired by some of the stories that we hear as the participants talk about their lives. The most impressive, and he's done it in the past, is a local attorney who hit rock bottom, but finally got his addictions under control. But it was a great event, and my compliments to the organizers and to the organization. And then my compliments to the staff and all of the committee that put together the Cesar Chavez event at Pacific Edison School. It was a lot of fun. It was on Saturday. It was very well attended. The keynote speaker was Miss Chavez, Christina Chavez, and she told some wonderful stories about her grandfather, including as a young girl, her and her cousin were so excited about going to New York City in this wonderful hotel, etc. And when she got there, they were going to New York City because the hotel was being picketed by the workers, so she didn't get a chance to stay in that wonderful hotel. She spent the weekend picketing the site. But anyway, it was a great event, and I want to congratulate the staff and the committee members.
Breaking news from the hospital. I'm happy to announce that Councilman Weaver's granddaughter, Kiana, was just born.
Hot off the presses.
Hot off the press. So
That is the news, not the
It's the
baby.
news, not the baby, yes.
so my congratulations to the Weaver family and everyone involved in that. It's always nice to have a new Glendale resident.
And Mr. Weaver will have his hands full.
Yes, he will. If he's a good grandfather.
Mr. Mayor,
he will.
we'll see if we can't get a telephone photo here before the meeting's over.
Okay, modern technology. So I just wanted to make that announcement. Mr. Draymond, anything?
I have nothing to report or nothing to add. Shocking as that may seem.
The only thing I want to add, as Mr. Quintero mentioned, those were two great events, the ARC and the Cesar Chavez event. This year's Cesar Chavez event was a little bit different than prior years. In prior years, we did it in the auditorium at the Pacific Edison School, and it was rather dark and confining, a little bit echoey and not much fun. But this weekend, it was out in the open in the plaza with a great band, with great barbecue going on, a great speaker. People were dancing, a lot of booths, and we really had a great opportunity to celebrate the life of Cesar Chavez. So next year, I want to tell everybody, make room on your calendar. It is really a great party that we're throwing, commemorating Cesar Chavez's life. A lot of fun, free food, I might add, free food, free music, a great time for everyone in the community. Mr. Kasakian.
Actually, I believe Fire has a presentation.
Ms. Gregorian.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, City staff. I'm here to join you tonight. My name is Tanya Gregorian, Public Education Coordinator for the Fire Department. I'm here this evening because I'd like to pose a question. No answer needed, of course, but I'd like to pose a question to everybody here, including the City Council, and to everybody watching, and everybody watching at home. I'd like to pose this question to you. How many of you are prepared to take care of yourselves and your loved ones, your family members, and your community in the case of an incident and a large-scale disaster? And I hope that some of you can answer by saying, yes, I'm prepared. But I know for a fact that a lot of you can say, no, actually, we're not prepared. And it's because of that point that we've brought forth the CERT program through the Fire Department for the community. And I'm here tonight to promote this program and to invite each and every one of you here tonight, including the City Council and including everybody sitting here and everybody watching at home. I want you to take this program. I want you to take this class about emergency preparedness and learn how to be trained in any scale, large or small scale incident that may happen within the city limits, within the community, wherever it may be. The next class is going to be starting this Thursday, April 3rd. I have flyers in the back with all of the dates, the times. The classes will be held at Station 21. Your own fire department is going to be instructing the class. We have props, we have materials. It's an excellent opportunity for people to become prepared for emergencies and disasters, and I really, truly hope that everybody takes advantage of this opportunity. I hope that within a year or two from now, every single one of us can answer, yes, I am prepared for emergencies, and I'm ready to take on this responsibility to take care of my family and my friends in a large-scale incident. Thank you very much. I hope to see you in class, and I hope if you're interested, please pick up a flyer in the back of the room, and you can contact the fire department if you have any questions about the CERT program. Thank you. Class starts this Thursday. Thanks.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is consent items, including minutes following our routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before motion is proposed.
I have a motion for the consent calendar.
Moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please. Mr. Howard.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, it doesn't need to be pulled, but the record should reflect, and the motion on the consent calendar should reflect that the motion at 5C1 is modified. We added the word cumulative to make it very clear that the cumulative combined total of the amount, you should have that in front of you, for the engineers is the $250,000.
Okay.
I'll pull my second so the maker of the motion can amend the motion.
And the motion is stated.
Now I'll second my motion that is amended.
Mr. Draymond.
Part of this includes the minutes, and I didn't know whether Councilmember Yusefian planned to abstain.
He was present at the meeting.
Even though it says absent.
Absent from the roll call for closed
roll
session.
call. Got it. Didn't want you to.
And it throws me all the time, believe me.
Council members Draymond?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver? Yusefian? Aye. Mayor Najarian?
Yes. Next item, please.
Next item is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. A speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the council may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for an investigation and a report.
It's time for oral communications. If anyone is not familiar with our policy that we've been operating under, please raise your hand. I'll repeat it. If not, our first 3-minute speaker is Leon Mayer, followed by Bill Wiseman.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and staff. My name is Leon Mayer, and I'm here on behalf of the Friends of the Glendale Public Library and the Author, Artists, and Friends series, which I chair. We have 2 April events, which I've already announced. I'll announce them again tonight. On April 15th, we're having a lady by the name of Nina Hachigian, who has written a book called The Next American Century, How the U.S. Can Thrive While Other Powers Rise. And this is a extensive book which covers extensive issues, and this lady is certainly qualified to write and give her opinion on these important things. She actually is local in a way. She lives in Echo Park area, and we like to have local people come to the library if we can. And she was born in the New York area. She went to Yale University, received a degree there, then went to Stanford, got a J.D. degree in law at Stanford, joined the RAND Corporation as a senior political scientist. She's also been on the Council for Foreign Relations, and she is at this time a member of that council, and she's been in other governmental agencies connected with them. She's also been on the Tavis Smiley Show. She's been interviewed Coast to Coast by Sam Donaldson on his program, and she is really a well-qualified lady to talk about the important issues that we're going to have in the next American century. And the thesis of her book basically is that the economic prosperity of the world is dependent on all the major nations working together. And that's, in a nutshell, April 15th, 7 o'clock. Come early if you can, and we expect people to come there to ask questions, buy our books, etc. April 17th, we're having another interesting speaker. He's local in a way. He came to Glendale at age 4, went to the elementary school here, went to Wilson Middle School, went to Glendale and graduated from Glendale High School, and then he went to college and moved out of the area. He's the cousin of Dario Fromer. His mother and father still live here. He has an aunt and uncle who still live here in Glendale. And he is well known. His name is Gregory Rodriguez. He's been an LA Times columnist for many years, and he's written, his publications have been in The Economist, Newsweek, Los Angeles Times, of course, Washington Post, and he has written this book called Could I do this? It'll just take me a couple of seconds. The title of his book is Mongrels, Bastards, Orphans, and Vagabonds. The subtitle is Mexican Immigration, the Future of Race in the United States. And we've invited we've invited Christina Chavez, who I met Saturday as well as the mayor did, and she's promised me, if at all possible, she would be there at the event. Quite a book, very interesting and very educational for anybody who's interested in all the ramifications of Mexican immigration. That's April 17th, 7 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill Wiseman.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and city staff. My name is Bill Wiseman, resident of Glendale. I'm here tonight on behalf of, let me see if I can remember the whole list, the Crescenta Valley Community Association, the CV Heritage, and the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley. And as I'm sure you all well remember, many of us were up here haranguing you for weeks and months in the time gone past about purchasing Rockhaven. And needless to say, we are ecstatic, obviously, at the results that have come of that. We wanted to formally come up here and thank you, all the city staff who helped negotiate this on behalf of the people of Glendale. And I wanted to also thank Mr. McFall for the great slideshow of the property, because most of us have never had a chance to see any of these buildings or the architectural details or anything there. And I think it's our hope that maybe at least some of those things might possibly be preserved in any future, rehabilitation or reuse of the facility. And we're hoping also that maybe some of those old photographs can end up in the hands of the Historical Society, possibly, if that might work out. And the last thing I wanted to mention is I noticed from today's agenda that you are also met in closed session for another trustee sale, possible land purchase negotiation involving some other property that we're also extremely interested in, and we wish you a great deal of success in that negotiation as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're to the 5-minute group. Liz Hammer, followed by Barry Allen.
Les Hammer, Pasadena. As I started to explain this afternoon, I understand that Councilman Weaver cajoled, leaned on Mayor Najarian to ask for a report on the Korean-American trade agreement, but I urged the City Council and our redevelopment agency to oppose this agreement. I believe that it was George Washington who warned his countrymen that we should be aware of entangling alliances. And that's what trade agreements are, entangling alliances. And by the way, there is no such thing as free trade. What we're really talking about is managed trade. Please consider Chapter 11 of the North American Free Trade Agreement and a story on Chapter 11 that was published on April 18, 2004 in the New York Times. Basically, a Canadian real estate company involved in a trade dispute appealed to the Supreme Court, which refused to hear their case. A short time later, one of the justices learned that a NAFTA tribunal agreed to hear their appeal. The point is that the Supreme Court is no longer the final arbiter or the law of the land. Now NAFTA tribunals trump the Supreme Court in any international or trade-related dispute. These binational and multinational trade agreements pushed by the Bush administration have cost us 1 million jobs, lowered our standard of living, and threatened our sovereignty. What are these trade agreements leading to? Well, on March 23, 2005, President Bush, Mexican President Vicente Fox, and Canadian Prime Minister Paul Martin signed the so-called Security and Prosperity Partnership, what I call the Insecurity and Poverty Partnership. Contrary to government claims, the SPP is a blueprint for a North American Union. And if you think that's a paranoid fantasy, please note that on February 4th, the Utah legislature approved House Resolution 1, demanding that the United States withdraw from the Security and Prosperity Partnership and halt any plans for open borders and a North American Union. Please remember that the European Union was sold to the rubes as an economic union, but its backers now admit that the purpose all along was to create a political union. If you have any friends or relatives in Europe, you know that bureaucrats in Brussels tell everyone what to do and when to do it. In England, a grocer can be arrested and fined for selling fish by the pound instead of by the kilo. Is one reason why the United Kingdom Independence Party would like to get its country out of the European Union. But it's not likely to be successful because it only has 12 seats in the European Parliament. Please oppose any and all trade agreements and support House Resolution 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry Allen, followed by Alan Freeman. What's that?
Mr. Mayor, Council, and staff, of course the public, I'm Barry Allen, and I know that if Mr. Draymond looks strangely at me, he's only looking at the clock. Earlier. It's unfortunate that my friend Mr. Weaver is not here, but certainly it's quite an event, a simcha, that he is with his granddaughter, and I'm quite certain that maybe by next week we'll see the actual photographs, just like we saw the in utero photographs earlier, the sonogram. But I think that as we have the selection of the next mayor next week, I'm going to still address the issue that I wanted to, and it has to do with the veracity of Mr. Weaver, because who knows, he could be appointed to the Airport Commission, Redevelopment Agency, Housing, the MTA, the mayorship, or all of them. In the past 2 weeks, he declared from this dais that his Dreaming of Roses Incorporated is a charitable nonprofit corporation, and it's been such since January. Last Thursday, March 26, I called and spoke to Michael Stafford, his agent for service of process, and the name listed on and the address listed on his corporate documents. He told me that Dreaming of Roses, Inc. was not office there, and that he was the person who had the information that I wanted. Afterwards, I called Mr. Weaver, and I actually spoke with him, and I requested the public information that I wanted, including the application for the tax-exempt status and the IRS determination letter that he claimed to have received in January. He told me it was none of my business, even though I requested it, and even though it's legally required to be provided by the nonprofit organization. He told me that none of my business, and that he was not going to supply the information, which is a violation, which he could actually lose, if he has it, the tax exemption of his organization. That's when he told me where to go and hung up the phone. Right, Mr. J, I like that smile. Disclosure is required for tax-exempt organizations. I filed a formal complaint with the IRS as he refused the lawful request that I had made. And I already mentioned that. And by the way, the other thing that could happen is that all the tax money, all the money that he took in and didn't take tax on, he may have to pay the taxes on that. It's okay, it's only money. And I'm here today to publicly request those documents. Certainly this is a public forum. The issue directly relates and affects the city, as funds raised were to reimburse the city for its $90,000 annual investment in the Rose Bowl float, not to provide scholarships of his choosing. Further, the city council will have to negotiate a new contract with this new corporation, because it's not the same one that the city has an agreement with. The agreement is with the Glendale Rose Float Association. And he's now taking on the reimbursement formerly done by the Glendale Rose Float Association. Now, I certainly would hope that this council would consider this information next week. The forms filed were 4506A, and this is a request for all of his documents, and a Form 13909, which is the complaint referral form. And it's, very simple. He could have come to this forum and said, here are the documents. He could have said, come to my office, I will show you the documents. His arrogance is something that affects the city council, and it affects it direly. Thank you. I'm Barry Allen for Good Government.
Now, Mr. Allen, before the meeting started, I had a brief conversation with you, and I told you you looked a little down lately, and it dawned on me as to why you were looking so down. And it was only after I came across a few of the news reports of the mayor of your old hometown of Detroit Mayor
Oh, they were in,
Kilpatrick.
that was in Vanguard, if you would have read it.
Who is in, but you're not there. You're over here.
I know.
It's like a gold prospector leaving Sutter's Mill in 1948 before they struck gold. Not to say that we're all angels up here, but certainly I think Vanguard could have been doing a bang-up job in Detroit. It's not too late. I think they need someone to really call the mayor and his
Actually,
his
Mr.
cohort.
Mayor, they do have the Department of Justice that's doing an excellent job with the mayor and the mayor's girlfriend. So, keep that in mind as well.
You underestimate your abilities, Mr. Allen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Mr. Yusefian.
I have a technical question from our city attorney. When we accept money from any organization as a city, in this case, Dreaming of Roses, do we care whether they're nonprofit or they're profit or anything of that?
We don't do any inquiry to determine what their profit status is or the like. We receive money from a number of different individuals and sources all the time.
So the only thing that we care about is to make sure that it's a legal entity and the money came from a legal way.
Obviously, if we've had information that, for example, the money had been laundered through illegal means, we would look into that. But generally speaking, whether it's a nonprofit or an individual who brings a check or a facsimile large check noting that they're providing a donation, whether it's from, I recall, donation from Whole Foods, for example, to Relay for Life or something else, we don't look at their status or their background or demand a whole host of documents from them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Freeman, followed by Dr. Spiritu.
Mr. Mayor, council members, and staff, my name is Alan Freeman, and I'm president of the Glendale Teachers Association. And as spokesperson of the 1,400 teachers in the Glendale Public Schools, I'm here tonight to offer you our appreciation, and also I'm here to request support. Allow me to start with thank you. Recently, there have been discussions and accusations made in regards to the support the City of Glendale offers the school district. Well, the fact of the matter is the City of Glendale offers a wide variety of resources that helps our schools, our teachers, and our young people every day. Allow me to highlight just a few of these many services provided that truly enhances the quality of education here in Glendale. First, there is the school resource officers at the secondary level. These officers are an integral part of the schools, and these officers develop meaningful relationships with teachers and students. I realize this is a large budget item for the city, but I assure you it helps tremendously, and it provides a safe and comfortable atmosphere at our schools. Then there's the support of the Glendale libraries, and our teachers use it frequently. It's outstanding. Teachers may request information to be gathered and help for students working on a specific project. This program is very helpful for educators, and it encourages our students to access the library. It is a service that I have personally used to the benefit of my students. The Every 15-Minute program, which deals with the serious issue of illegally driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. This program is quite intense, but as a teacher of seniors in high school, I believe it is well worth our effort. I am glad that the city helps allocate staff and resources to this important effort, and I can assure you that I have had many direct and meaningful conversations in my classes with my students because of this program. And there are parks and recreation facilities that our youth use, the crossing guards, after-school youth programs, and many more programs offered by the city. And as I recognize all that the city does for our schools, I must share how upset I was to hear that during this entire dialogue of inaccurate, inflated energy charges the school district incurs, that the school district could have saved itself a significant amount of money and resources by not hiring an outside consultant to reduce energy costs, but rather using available city resources free of charge. In fact, it was several years ago that the GUSD leadership approached me as president of the GTA and shared this idea of hiring an outside consultant to reduce energy cost. And there was no mention of anything available by the city. Did the GUSD have the best interest of its students, parents, teachers, and classified staff? Well, not knowing any better at the time, and with the described goal to save resources for the school district, the GTA supported the idea of hiring this outside company. But now learning that the city could have and would have provided this service for free, it is a shame that the school district didn't tap into this resource. Mayor Najarian, council members, As president of the GTA, I have witnessed many school board meetings this year, and the fallacy that the City of Burbank gives a 20% discount to the Burbank School District for energy rates has been stated time after time at these meetings. Quite frankly, it has become nauseating to listen to because it is so political in nature and just not true. I agree with Mr. Draymond that the overtly political nature this issue has taken is very disappointing, and the lack of professionalism on part of the GUSD board president was greatly disturbing. The very fact that the GUSD leadership would come and challenge this body using bogus information is embarrassing. Mr. Mayor, on behalf of the 1,400 teachers of the GTA, I want to share that I understand your frustration. Furthermore, please know that you have our thanks and appreciation for all you do, all this council does, and all this city does in helping our schools. Now, at the start of the speech, I shared that I also had a request. Mayor Najarian, the truth is that this year's state budget does raise concerns for the minds of many Californians who care about public education. I come here tonight asking for your help, the help of the council, and the help from the residents of the city. The fact is, California ranks 46 out of 50th in per-pupil spending, and which results in a serious shortfall when it comes to what our students deserve. Mayor Najarian, if Californians were just to raise its level of spending to the national median, it would mean $2,000 more per student every year. And if you were to multiply this by our 27,000 students, it would be approximately $50 million per year to our schools in Glendale. Mayor Najarian and council, we are in the process of organizing a rally on the Day of the Teacher, May 14th. I invite you to participate. We'd love to have you there. And we ask for and seek your support as we attempt to organize this event. And we will be back with more information as time goes on. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Please keep us posted on that date, the Day of the Teacher.
Well, I just want to thank you, Alan, for the good work that you've done for many, many years and your leadership leading the GTA. And I think you know that this council and previous councils are always up for helping the school district. I can't think of one time in the past 7 years that we haven't gone out of our way to help the school district with its financial difficulties, and even when there were no financial difficulties, trying to help as best we can. So it's great to see you here tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Youssef.
I have a question from the city manager. I don't see the Department of Water and Power director here, but somewhere down the line. I'd like to know what is determined as a small business. And I'd like to have the determination by how many employers do they have to qualify for a big business?
Employees.
Employees. How many people does a business have to have working for you to know that you're a big business, you're no longer a small business?
We'll get Mr. Yousefi and Mr. Mayor will get you the specific definition. I believe it's actually in terms of how much power they draw is how they cast. Not in terms of how many employees. It's actually in terms of how big the facilities are and how much power they draw. I think that's how GWP actually categorizes small business, medium business, large businesses, really more in the context of how much power do they draw, not necessarily how many employees.
So what are we considered to be?
Well, again, we would be considered very large, as would the school district. Those are large. Over $1 million a year in billings would be considered large.
Then I would strongly recommend you get a hold of a memorandum that was sent to the school district that says they are considered to be no different than any other small business, and they can apply for some of the grants available for small businesses. If you don't have that, I would be more than happy to provide you with a copy of that memorandum.
If you would, please.
I would.
I just want to say in answer to your question, when I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce, it's kind of a sliding scale in terms of what the government considers a small business. Some government entities go for a certain number and others go for different numbers. So hard to pin it down.
Thank you. The next speaker is Dr. Richard Espiritu.
In the air somewhere. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and staff. My name is Dr. Richard Espiritu. I've talked about the B-line many times in the past, and I've used city documents, California Highway Patrol documents, et cetera, et cetera. This is the BC report on the AC thanks to the CA. This is a complaint filed by a citizen of the city of Glendale who rides the B line. This is bus number 33. During the month of August, air conditioning didn't work. This is a response from MV Transportation regarding that. I have a couple things highlighted. We'll talk about this later on. This is another complaint that responds from MV Transportation regarding the same bus on a different date. This is another bus, number 29, routes 1 and 2, air conditioning. Still doesn't work. These are some very interesting numbers here. These are dates, bus numbers in the problems. AC is the air conditioning. At the very bottom, you'll note that there is a 30708 bus number 33. Air conditioning was not working. One of the statements, this is a DVI. This is required by the California Highway Patrol for the drivers to fill out every day prior to taking the bus out in service. It states no AC, no power to the fare box, goes on, and then it also has the name of the drivers. Interesting is those two drivers have had combined service of 12 years. I do believe they know if the air conditioning doesn't work on a bus. This is a statement that was made by MV. Statement was, backup work as soon as possible so that both our passengers and our drivers do not have to suffer on hot buses. This was a statement made. Those are the dates where the buses, those were 4 consecutive days that the number 33 bus had air conditioning that did not work. I had a conversation with Officer Kevin Dizon, who is the Reserve Training Officer Coordinator for the Glendale Police Department, in November of 2002, which he stated when regarding MV Transportation, because he knocked on my door, wanted to know why I was having problems with MV Transportation. His statement was that that's what happens when you deal with people who are uneducated. It's apparent that he left off the word prevaricator, because the documents that is presented here tonight shows that they didn't fix the air conditioning, unfortunately, and the air conditioning still isn't working 6 months after the citizens complained about it. Of course, nobody's going to be complaining about air conditioning today or tomorrow, but in August, a couple of weeks ago, it was hot and people were complaining about the air conditioning. I'm going to give each member of the City Council a copy of the DVI, which says exactly, and for Mr. Howard, I will also give you a complete copy of all these records that I have, thanks to the CA, which is the City Attorney, Mr. Kasakian.
Well, thank you,
Mr. Mayor, City Council, staff, I thank you for your time and consideration. And when the renewal contract comes up, I'd like you to take in consideration all the facts that I've presented over the last 5 years regarding the B-line.
Thank you. Margaret Hammond. followed by Nancy Kent.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city staff, and the audience here and out there in TV land. My name is Margaret Hammond, and I'm sure Mr. Weaver is very excited, very excited. I remember when my first grandson was born. I remember when my second one was born. I was in the room, actually, with my daughter, and it was a wonderful experience. There's nothing like it, really. Now to get on to some things here. The Glendale Clean and Beautiful Committee are sponsoring the poster contest tomorrow at 5 o'clock, from 5 to 7, at the Civic Auditorium. This is when the winners of the poster contest are announced out of whatever 10,000 that we had posters to go through and decide who was the winners of that contest. And there will be a lot of excited people there tomorrow night, children and grandparents and parents and whatever. So it's a wonderful event. Again, this committee is your city committee. And this is your book, the book that we paid and did in conjunction or whatever with the city of Glendale. I've been handing this book out at all my meetings where I go to my patrons, my women's athletic, and I handed it out today at the Glendale Beautiful, where we had our annual awards luncheon to give awards to various businesses and a couple of the parks of the city for making the quality of life in Glendale much nicer and happier by keeping up their properties and so forth. We kind of work together in that Glendale Beautiful has a representative on Glendale Clean and Beautiful, just as Glendale Historical does, just as the Chamber of Commerce, Board of Education. That's how your committee is formed, is from different members of your city, the citizens of the city. People love this book. I think they might be really, they're really entranced with the picture of Mr. Starbird, our the front on the cover. They're like, wow, that's a great picture. And he's smiling very nicely. So, and he's frowning at me right now.
That was a lucky shot, by the way, catching him smiling.
You said that, not me. Okay. Anyway, I have to tell you, though, everybody, they're just absolutely, I have people phoning me. They're coming into neighborhood services. Today at the meeting, they were following me around and wanting these books. These are great. They really are. They're just a real PR for the city of Glendale. And I am very proud to hand them out, and I'm going to keep on. Sometimes I have to do a little wrestling with Sam Engel. He says, you're taking another box of our books? Yes, I am. And I'm giving them to people who enjoy them. And a lot of the city employees love them. If they haven't seen them, they're wonderful. By the way, you do know that the picture is the photo from the photo contest last year. That was the winner, one of the winners from the photo contest that we held from the night on the plaza. Okay, the other one now, Glendale Beautiful, that I was today, we had the Adams Square Mini Park. And you know, that's a wonderful park. You know why? Because you come down the hill, and the wonderful sign that says Glendale is right there, and you know you're in Glendale. You come over the hill and into that little area, and it's marvelous. The Jewel City Bowl, I don't know how many of you have seen the new paint job, 6-color paint job. It's wonderful. I think it just really shows it up. It's just down the street from the City Hall here. And again, and of course, the Spar Heights community. I mean, that's a beautiful building. It was really great to rehab it and use it. The community loves it. And it is a beautiful building. There's no doubt about it. So those were some of the people. The Namath Office Building at 415 East Broadway, and Conrad's Restaurant, which we all know. We go, oh, well, they do have beautiful landscaping and very nice signage. And that's something that's really worthwhile telling people that they're doing a great job. The people, the awardees, were very excited. They attended the luncheon. Now, I have one more thing, and it was last Thursday, a member, Mr. Platt, gave a wonderful, wonderful lecture and a series of pictures on modern structures in Glendale. Just let me finish that. And one of them, of course, that is considered outstanding is the First United Methodist Church of Glendale. If you've never gone on a tour of that church, it is wonderful. And I'm hoping we're going to be able to enlist Mr. Platt to be a speaker. They do have speakers from the city of Glendale available, I've heard, and that his program is marvelous. It was in conjunction with Glendale Historical Group and Society, and so that's the reason I'm bragging about it, because it was a wonderful evening. Thank you very much, and I was... By the way, I almost ran into the shooting. I only missed it because I went into the drugstore. I heard all the bang-bangs and thought, that's a lot of fireworks. And by the time I came out, I found out what it was. It was exciting.
We have another update on Kiana. What would her last name be? You know, it's a Slavic name. I forget the son-in-law's name, but she weighed in at 7 pounds, 1 ounce, and she's 21 and a half inches long. We'll continue with the updates. I'm not sure what else. Maybe eye color and the score. Okay. Thank you. Nancy Kent is next.
My name is Nancy Kent. I'm a resident of Glendale. And first point, regarding additional no smoking areas in Glendale, I would like to thank the council for your wisdom last week when you decided to skip having community meetings about this, because, yes, all of us interested in this will want you folks to hear our comments, and more on that later. Next point. School Board President Greg Krikorian is a very nice man, a very friendly man, but I am very disappointed that, whether he intended to or not, School Board President Krikorian has managed to make some people in Glendale, and I have no idea how many, associate the horrible financial situation proposed for our schools with Glendale City Council members, rather than the people who are actually responsible, namely Governor Schwarzenegger and those members of the California State Legislature who do not have the good sense or the integrity to collect money to invest in our schools and invest in our society, what's known as collecting taxes. And since tax is a dirty word, I will stress the state legislators need to close the tax loopholes and raise tax rates for the wealthiest people and corporations in our state. In recent years, the people and corporations with the highest incomes have been enjoying tax cuts and obscene tax loopholes. The money to adequately fund California schools should come from them, not from California cities or California's municipal power companies. I think that the requests School Board President Krikorian made publicly during oral communications at the March 11th City Council meeting and through the media with his statements in the March 15th article in the news press, regardless of what his intentions were not in the best interest of the school district of Glendale or the residents of Glendale. I was at the City Council meetings March 11th, 18th, and 25th, and I've read the articles and letters to the editor about this in the news press, and based on all that, I agree with what Councilman Draymond said about this at the March 25th City Council meeting, and I would like to thank him publicly for saying those things. And I believe him when he included in his comments that people had advised him not to make that statement. Right now, I would rather not be talking about this, but I cannot remain silent, especially after I saw the letters to the editor that were generated by this controversy that point to our City Council members as the bad guys who are not willing to help Glendale schools. I will ask all the school board members to do what they can to let people in Glendale know who is really responsible for the unacceptable proposed school budget cuts. The governor and state legislature, not our city council members. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. The last card I have is from Mr. Rubik Tarosian. Mr. Tarosian.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Najarian, council members, city staff. My name is Rubik Tarosian. I followed the instructions of Councilmember Yusefian last week. I called his office the very next day, and I met with him earlier this morning. I want to thank Mr. Yusefian publicly for spending over 1 hour and 40 minutes with me. Thank you, Mr. Yusefian. We went over certain documents, certain pictures, and some video footage on one of the city staff's computer. I had no doubts of Mr. Yusefian's integrity, but I never had the opportunity to spend an hour and 40 minutes with him as I did today. Earlier today, just to mention that, as all of you know, the reasons why I came to the city, at least in front of the council, was for two reasons, and it began from November of last year. The first one was regarding some ordinances and some policies. And even though I still have not gotten a straight answer from anyone, but at least certain issues were clarified by Mr. Yusefian this morning. When I brought two issues in front of the council last week, one was about an assault, the other one was about a false declaration signed under penalty of perjury. Today, with your permission, I'm going to just talk about this declaration, since the doctor who's evaluating our case, his report is going to go out this week. I have promised Mr. Yusefian not to get into certain matters, but just get to the point of issues, since I only have 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 16 seconds now. I have outlined, highlighted at least 14 statements out of 16 statements that are in this declaration that are false. Hopefully, if Mr. Yusefian watched this same video footage that I had taken, he would agree with me, but maybe he won't. I haven't spoken to him since this matter. And again, thank you, Mr. Yusefian, for having an open mind, at least looking at what I've been trying to show some of the people in the city. The chief of police never asked to see this. Certain officers in his office had asked, but the way they asked, the tone and the conditions that they had given me was not acceptable to me. That's why the chief did not see the footage. But I'll be more than happy to sit, not with the chief, I don't want to waste his time, not with Mr. Starbird, I don't want to waste his time, but anyone that they agree upon, for them to at least see what Mr. Yusefian saw today. I had mentioned before, it's very important. If it was for anything else, I would not have been in front of you wasting your time. It's for my son. These documents, or these 2 pages full of lies, as I mentioned before, twice it was introduced to this doctor by an attorney. My wife agreed with every single word here in front of the doctor. Only if I prove that these 2 pages, like I said, 14 statements out of 16 are lies, and the only 2 that are true are the ones where she mentions her name, the ones that she mentions she's over the age of 18. Everything is a lie. Few of the statements on the footage of that day that are made by Glendale police officers contradict even what this lady says. Few of the statements that the officers made, and I hope Mr. Yusefian was listening to the same thing that I was listening to. I think his English is better than mine, so I hope he understood better than I understood what the officers meant, but he heard everything. I'll be more than happy to share it with everybody. I don't like to make a public thing in front of the whole city. In closing, I would like to also share something with you. The young lady from the fire department that was here earlier posed a question and sparked a question from me, which I want to ask. How many of you in the council or sitting in the audience, and I do see there's at least 2 police officers here, how many of you are willing to risk your life for a police officer, a city of Glendale's police officer, whose life you think was in danger, he was outside of the jurisdiction of City of Glendale. He was in Los Angeles by himself, outside of his car. How many of us residents would at least go, approach, and ask if they needed help? I can at least raise my hand, and I can say I have done it at least half a dozen times. And in case if Mr. Starbird would like to know the times, who the officers were, or who the officer was, the date, even the name of the officer, Mr. Starbird, you don't have to ask Mr. Balian to call me. Get in touch with me tomorrow. At least I can give you the name of the officer, because the last time I've done this was last year. As I've said before, I have always been for the law. I respect the law. That's the reason why I'm here asking for justice. Thank you.
Mr. Yusefian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, I took the opportunity of spending some time with Mr. Torosian. This document that was provided to all of us, which is basically an affidavit by one of our janitors, janitorial workers, declares several items in here. I did take opportunity to review his tapes, which are basically in the format of a DVD. I must say they weren't. I thought I was just going to look at one tape. There were like many tapes that he had, but I took the opportunity to review some of those tapes. I will tell you, after reviewing some of those tapes, and it's very obvious, is what you see on the tapes, it's impossible to make a mistake. I would say that some of the allegations that are made in this document are not accurate. So there was definitely, evidence. You could see that one of the individuals actually tried to move the camera away from his hand. There was also several other things. I don't want to go through this whole thing because I don't think this is the place for it. It's a court issue. But nevertheless, I would say without reservation that this declaration is in error and not true. He had the documents in his face, and also some of the accusation that was made in here, later on a police officer walked over to Mr. Torosian and said point blank, I did have an opportunity to talk to her, and she basically said she didn't see anything. Now, at the time, the officer thought that his video camera was off. Yes, the video camera, the picture part was off, but the sound was still being recorded. So all that conversation was recorded while they thought it was not being recorded. It's kind of disturbing to me that one of our city workers will testify to something that is not accurate. But nevertheless, I understand what he's going through, and I took the time to look at that. But I did tell him that this is an issue that he needs to resolve between himself, his attorney, and his wife attorney, and for the benefit of the child, they need to work this out. But I will discuss this issue with Mr. Starbird and the city attorney at length a little bit later, and then we can go over this, and I'll let them know what I saw and heard. So, Mr. Torosian, thank you very much, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Mr. Yusefian, and thank you, Council, for listening.
Mr. Torosian, this is still an ongoing case, is that correct?
It is an ongoing case, Mr. Najarian, but unfortunately, I think last time when you mentioned it is an ongoing case, but my divorce has nothing to do with my father-in-law assaulting me in the police department.
That's not the issue. I mean, you have an ongoing case.
Yes.
You have a witness now that you can subpoena to court and bring with you, Mr. Yusefian, if there's any issues of he said, she said. He's already given his opinion on the truth and the veracity of the declarant. So I think things are looking up for you. And
but thank you, Mr. Najjar. But just to mention to you that when I first came here, the only reason why I came here, I wanted to know if an employee of the City of Glendale is filing a declaration, is the city responsible for it? Is there a policy against employees signing and executing a declaration?
The First Amendment, that an employee of the city cannot be controlled in anything that they say. If there's an issue of perjury, if there's an issue of credibility, that's entirely up to the trial court judge or the jury to make that determination. We, as councilmen, are not playing that role of placing going into a child custody issue and saying, oh, what she said on that day is not true. For us to go and investigate the facts that have pertinence to your case, I believe are completely inappropriate. And that's where I drew my line with you. I met with you, I discussed, I gave you some advice, and you haven't followed that advice. You found someone else who would become more active in your case. I am not going to go there, but you found someone that is ready to give an opinion, and congratulations, and please continue, but I don't think the city should get involved any more in this.
Mr. Najarian, I mean, I don't want to get involved in the politics of this here.
That's not a question, that's just a statement.
Yes, but if you're not allowing a custodian to sign a declaration, if you are allowing a city employee to do it, then why are you stopping police officers from giving declarations? That's my question. If it works for the goose, it works for the gander.
I just want to repeat my initial advice.
I heard
to you
the first time, yes.
Keeping things on a calm and cordial basis are probably the best thing for you.
Oh, definitely, and I thank you for that. But the reason why I came back here over and over again, because this declaration has been provided to a doctor several times, and every time it hurts me.
Mr. Tarosian, as an attorney who's been practicing over 20 years, if I could get $1 for every false declaration or every lie that was put before the court by someone under oath, or a mistruth being stated, I would be a very wealthy man. So I know I know we certainly have certain high hopes for individual credibility and veracity. But please, these things happen. The way to sort it out is to go before the trial judge and express what you feel are perhaps the holes
in this case, it's not it is also provided in a court of law, but it's been provided to a child custody evaluator.
I understand.
That's what's important for me. And I thank you publicly the same way that I thank Mr. Yusefian for spending time with me.
I'm not looking for thanks. I just want to keep it in perspective.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. The next item, please. That's all I have for oral communication.
Under 8, under action items, is Director of Planning regarding Glendale Register of Historic Resources listing for the property at 1800 South Brand Boulevard. 8A1 is a resolution designating the property to be listed on the Glendale Registry of Historic Resources.
And Mr. Yusefian.
Move 8A1.
Second.
Well, I have a question.
The owner wants it registered.
I understand that, but I just have a question about the previous owner. The Strangler?
The Glendale Strangler?
Is this the Strangler house?
No.
That's the next one?
This is the Seeley.
Okay. Oh, this is Seeley. Okay. I have no objection to Seeley.
We're not
It's not as
strangling
interesting
anyone.
as the Strangler house, but... Okay, we have a motion and a second. There's no further discussion. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Strayman?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver? Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. Congratulations. Next item.
8B is Director of Planning regarding Glendale Registry of Historic Resources listing the Mills Act contract for the property at 1415 Royal Boulevard. At B1 is a resolution designating the property as a historic resource and authorizing Mills Act contract.
Okay, I don't think does anyone request a full staff report on this?
Oh, you have cards?
I do have a card, but before the speakers, there, Mr. Quintero?
I just want to make sure that they don't confuse Ed Strangler Lewis with the Hillside Strangler that also lived in Glendale in another part of town. This is a Glendale, one of the most famous American athletes during the early decades of the 20th century, and a prominent figure in the Glendale community. I wanted to clear that up.
And my question, before I hear from the speaker, is, I guess, is the nature of the sport at that time. And professional wrestling has evolved over the decades. So my question is, can we make any comparison to wrestling in the 30s, I guess the late 20s to near the 30, wasn't it, 1930, to what we see today? Is it that type of showmanship and bravado and I mean, there are people that believe that professional wrestling is real and that the moonwalk was staged. So where are we in that realm of reality?
I am Jay Platt. I'm the preservation planner for the city as well as its wrestling consultant. I've never been a big fan of wrestling, so I learned a lot reading some of the materials for this, and I think I can say that wrestling back at the turn of the 20th century was a different kind of sport. Not quite what we'd call Olympic wrestling as we see it today, but it definitely had some showmanship aspects and a lot of big personalities and characters. But I think it was more of a sport where real strength and real stamina were encouraged, and it wasn't kind of the cartoonish thing we have today. Ed Strangler Lewis was a great
He was
actor.
rather famous, I mean, from the clippings, and he had a restaurant. And the home itself is beautiful. I mean,
Although, Mr. Mayor, I have to say Stranglers is probably not the best name for a restaurant. So.
It was the Monterey Cafe.
Yeah, I know.
Good. At least he made that.
A good name for a wrestler, though.
And we're, with your decision, we're going to call the house the Lewis House rather than the Strangler Lewis House, so the official name.
Okay, we have a, thank you, Mr. Platt. I'm not sure if there's any questions of you, but let's go to Sonia Montejano. Oh, for questions only. Do we have any questions of the owner of the Lewis home?
Move the item.
I'll second it.
No other cards? That's all I have.
And I also have a comment about the current owners, one of whom is a retired sheriff's deputy, and his spouse is also a former sheriff's deputy and actually is on television presently. So who knows? We may be changing the house again to from Lewis House to Montejano House. But they've done a great job of rehabbing this property. So very pleased they're going to receive this designation this evening.
They're talking about whether or not they're going to demonstrate the Strangler body slam right up here on the dais. So.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. If there's no further questions, let's move to roll call.
Council members Freeman.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver. Yusefian.
Aye.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes. Congratulations. We do have some new business as we move down the list. Mr. Quintero.
I move...
Is that new business?
No, we don't have new
That's
business.
the,
That was
that's the modified motion at 5C1.
Oh, the cumulative. So we have no new business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
In memory of...
Reverend Mark Joffman.
Father Mark Joffman, yes.
Second.
We are adjourned.